Welcome back, friends and family. This is Matty Motorcycle, and we are lucky enough today to review Kawasaki Heavy Industries H2 SX SE. And we're about to talk about why this is an absolute overachievement in the motorcycle world. Now friends, technically this is a sport touring motorcycle, alright? 100% geared toward the sport part. Yes, you can put on hard bags. Yes, you can take anything you want with you. And yes, for a sport bike, this is extremely comfortable. I want everybody to think late 90s, early 2000s, Honda CBR, first generation R1 comfortable. The distance between the foot pegs and the seat allows you to be extremely relaxed while you're riding. Reach to the handlebars, not bad at all. You can sit up straight if you want to, but of course, we'll get to it in a little bit. This offers amazing wind protection for when it's time to get busy. Now, we have this huge engine that we're going to talk about. We have this amazing suspension, brakes, the exhaust. We have so much to go over on this motorcycle. The most important factor about this bike is, of course, its big brother, the regular H2 and the H2R, that track-focused bike. Now, it is a very, very similar engine. We'll talk about it in a little bit, but most importantly is this frame. What Kawasaki did was they took the frame from the H2, this amazing trellis frame, and they just made it a little bit more robust. They used thicker aluminum so that we're able to finally take a friend at over 200 miles per hour and keep a couple of bags and our stuff with us also. So this bike is built slightly more robust, slightly more made for the long haul, okay? So this engine in here is very, very similar to the engine that Kawasaki uses in the H2, but only difference is it's made to last longer. If you're so inclined to learn about exactly why, there's a whole bunch of technical specs that you can go Google yourself. But the point is, and the take home always is, this is going to last forever, get a little bit better gas mileage, and at 10,000 miles, I'm going to have to take the whole thing apart and rebuild it, all right? Replacing every single gasket on it. So for the long haul, this is the bike you want, and that power is still there. We're going to start at the nose of this bike, go through this whole thing, talking about just why this is wonderful. Now, most notably about this bike is its styling. In my opinion, you either love it or you hate it. I happen to love it. It is a departure from the standard look of particularly Kawasaki's and most sport bikes. Most notably, this big bug-eye headlight, which, as a side note, you can see into the future with. The light is so bright. This HID headlights, they're really fantastic. The whole nose is made to deflect wind away from you. And while you're in that little bubble underneath that cockpit, you can't feel or hear a thing. The wind blows right over you, right down your back, and you get this little silent bubble going on. Really great. They give you battle axe tires, which I'm kind of okay with, particularly for the road. They will last a really long time, give or take 8,000 miles, depending on how hard you push the front end and the front tire. The back, you probably get a little bit less out of it, because it does have a few hundred horsepower. In my personal opinion, when it comes time, we're going to switch these out. 330 mil floating rotors, you gotta love them, lots of stopping power. As far as the calipers themselves, they are great for use on the road and for most, I'd say 95% of your riding. Me personally, I am a fan of the Brembo monoblocks. I know on the SE Plus model they started to offer them, so clearly I'm not the only one to have that issue. They definitely will stop you, but have no illusions about it. This bike definitely goes faster than it stops. You do have a really fantastic ABS system, cornering ABS system. It's linked to the speed of the front tire, and there is a lean angle sensor on the inside of the bike, so it knows how far you're leaned over, how much you are able to brake given the speed, and they judge it by how fast the wheel is turning. These are pretty cool. You do have these lean, angle-sensitive cornering lights, Kawasaki is calling them. And what they do is, as you lean the bike over at 10, 20, and 30 degrees respectively, the 3 different lights kick on. So, especially at night, as you're leaning through a corner, maybe this won't turn with you like on some of the other motorcycles out there right now, but this side lights will light up your way so you can see through the corner. Haven't exactly put it to the full test yet because it does light up right in front of you, and if you're any kind of rider, you should be looking way off into the distance. But I'll make sure that I notice as time goes on. These rear view mirrors actually show you what's behind you. They're wide enough set on the bike that even if you have big goofy shoulders, you can see straight around you to the cars and people behind you. Super, super useful. Very well done, Kawasaki. I want to take a minute and explain to you just how special and how much engineering went into this bike. You can tell by this symbol right here on the front. Now, Kawasaki has 2 sets of engineers. I don't know if people know it, but they literally make motorcycles for fun. Their real job is Kawasaki Heavy Industries. And what they do is they make trains in Japan, bridges in Japan, they make huge construction equipment and cranes. But for our purposes here, what we want to know is their jet turbine engines and their power plant turbines. They make tremendous 40 by 40 foot power plant turbines and jet engines, particularly for the brand new 787 Boeing. So let's just put it like this. If they can make a Boeing 787 jet turbine that keeps people in the air, when they take their time and put together a supercharger impeller that's 3 inches by 3 inches, you bet it's got hundreds and thousands of hours of research on their big toys that all they did was shrink down for their small toys. One of the reasons why this bike is so special and represents so much R&D. For the money that you're spending on this, now, yes, it is definitely more expensive than a typical sport bike or sport tourer, but the money that's into this, you are getting back so many times over in the performance, in how long it's going to last, and just how special and rare these things are. Now, as we said earlier, this is the SX model of the H2. So you have a couple of bells and whistles that aren't on the regular H2. For instance, raised up handlebars. The H2 has its clip-ons attached underneath the triple tree. This has them above the triple for a way less reach and a way more comfortable ride. If you're going to be on the road, this is definitely the model to have. You'll last so much longer and you still have plenty of room to get into that full tuck. I already put some Woodcraft frame sliders on this just in case you have a tip over. Most of the time it's not an issue, but they weren't that expensive and it's definitely something that's worthwhile because these fairings are very costly to bust, particularly the turning lights we had mentioned earlier. Now, Cowie was smart enough to put on steel braided brake lines, but we only have a Nissan Master Cylinder. And like I said, this does stop the bike just fine, but it definitely goes faster than it stops. So if we get into any precarious situations, going maybe a little bit faster, 2, 3, 4 times the local speed limit, you better be able to stop way before you really have to. The suspension on this bike, the front suspension, is pretty great. Definitely set up for a heavier rider, definitely set up for heavier situations. It is adjustable, so you can put compression and preload in, which helps out a whole bunch, especially on those twisty, windy back roads. Now, I don't want to say that this handles like a scalpel. It handles more like a steak knife. Meaning you definitely can cut up everything you need to cut up, but when things get really precise and tricky, you definitely got to slow down. You can handle it, steak knife will work just fine, but when you got to get surgical, you got to make sure you're taking your time. Again, I definitely want to upgrade the braking system, but top to tail, the front end works perfectly. So the middle portion of this motorcycle, we would definitely be remiss without talking about the overachievement of this engine. Like we said earlier, this is designed by Kawasaki Heavy Industries. They make impellers for power plants, so to put one teeny one in a motorcycle is definitely brilliant. Now, originally in 2015, they made it for the regular H2 and the H2R. What they did for this particular motorcycle is they actually changed the angle of the impeller and how forceful the boost was on the engine. Now, this engine is much more robust. It's used heavier quality materials than the original H2, making it last a little bit longer, being able to take the forces generated by this impeller a lot better and with a lot less detriment, so you don't have to rebuild the engine every now and then. In its stock form, forces about 200 horsepower through that crank. When you get down to the wheel, way over 190 still. So they are pretty brilliant, and let me just be psychic for a minute. This engine, when you are able to tune it, can get 240, 250 horsepower out of it. We're going to get to that part a little bit later. The fact that they detune it kind of means I'm thinking future generations of this bike are going to jump up 10 horsepower every single generation. So the 2020 will probably have a little bit more. 2021 probably a little bit more. 2022 even more than that. Meanwhile, it's all going to be the same engine with different tuning. Now, obviously, the more horsepower run through, the little bit more wear and tear. And anybody who's ever had a turbocharged 4-cylinder engine knows that after a while, you blow out your rear main gasket. So the more horsepower you put, the more maintenance you're going to have to use for this bike. But for 250 horsepower on a street motorcycle, I think it's worth it. Moving on. These foot pegs, now they don't look like much, but everybody who's ever ridden a dirt bike or off-road machine knows that when you have this little rubber stopper over your foot peg, it changes the vibrations of the motorcycle up through your leg and spine. What we want to do there is make this so much more comfortable. Just this little rubber piece changes the whole feel of it. Your rear brake, pretty useful, but Kawasaki pretty smart. He actually has linked brakes in here. So when you pull the front, the back engages just that right amount to get you to turn in and keep the bike nice and settled. This seat is great. As far as sport bikes go, you can sit on this for 2-3 hours at a time without getting that butt cramp. Now, just so you know, it still is a sport bike seat. It's not super thick, so either for my older riders or anybody who's ever had some back pain in your life, you might want to upgrade that seat, put a little extra squish in here, but for most of the guys who are riding, this is going to be fantastic. Plenty of tank to grip onto, going through those twisties, and when you want to have a nice relaxed ride, sitting up straight, not an issue. Now, a couple things about the booty of this machine. Obviously, we have room for a passenger, which is wonderful. Take your wife, take your best friend, take your kid at 175 miles an hour all day. All that time, getting 25 to 35 miles a gallon. Fantastic. You can't get a better deal with anything else on the road. Now, I will be honest with you. This exhaust note definitely leaves something to be wanted. Callie, I get it. You wanted this to be a sport tourer, but you gotta make some kind of noise. Come on, 1,000cc engine with a supercharger and you can barely hear it? I was heartbroken. So that is definitely something that's have to get switched on this bike. Now, the really cool piece. So, you have your friends, you have your family, perhaps you're taking your mom or auntie out on the back of your bike. You have mobile suitcases. Now, these are the same system that's on any of the Kawasaki machines out in the whole world. So their Versys, any of their touring SX motorcycles all have these same bags, and they are so easy to load on and off. Take your handy dandy key, turn it, pop the switch, they go right in, put the switch back down, and take your key out, and you have everything you could ever need with you all the time. You can fit a full face helmet inside these bags, no problem. Put your wife's purse, put a water bottle, bring a sandwich, go on a picnic. Ready to go at any moment. I think they're very well designed, wonderful, super convenient, and they barely move around at high speeds. You gotta love that. And you're specifically going to be doing plenty of high speeds on your H2SX. Big thanks to our friends at Kawasaki for putting on this separate preload adjuster. When you have a friend on the back, we all know the butt sags a little bit in all motorcycles. So with just a quick twist of this little anodized, pretty green preload adjuster, you can make the back a little bit stiffer to account for any of your luggage that you're bringing or any of the people that you're bringing. Don't sacrifice the handling of the motorcycle to bring your friend along. Matter of fact, it's even more crucial to have the bike handle well while you have somebody on it, because you don't want to scare them, and even more, you don't want to kill anybody, including yourself. This has a full suite of electronics. You have every bell and whistle and rider aid that you could ever want on a motorcycle. Now, I'm just going to talk from personal experience. With any of these motorcycles, whether you have electronic suspension, electronic rider aids, you don't want to mess with them on the fly. Always pay attention to where you're going. If you have a motorcycle that has all of these rider aids and bells and whistles, set it before you ride. And if you're going to fidget with it, stop, pull over, go to a parking lot. Don't do it at a red light and only be halfway done. As soon as the light changes, the guy behind you is honking and you get on your throttle without the proper settings. All right? Motorcycling as a whole is not dangerous. Don't let anybody tell you that it's dangerous. However, it is extremely unforgiving. Okay? The littlest thing that could happen on the road, a bump, a pothole, a bug, anything that hits you in the eye while you're trying to ride could be completely detrimental. Where in a car, bug hits the windshield, pothole, maybe it scrapes your rim up a little bit, but on these things, you could die. So what you want to try to do is make sure the motorcycle is set up just the way you want it before you go out on it. Make sure you pay attention to that, kids. A couple of luxurious amenities that you'll find on your SX model of Kawasaki's H2. First off, a center stand. Absolutely ideal when you're trying to change your back tire, which, just so everybody knows, the front and rear wheels on this, the exact same wheels you get on the H2. Matter of fact, I heard that I have a little bit of a hookup for carbon fiber tires. Carbon fiber wheels. We're definitely going to look into that. Now, you do have a half TFT dash and half analog tachometer. I'm a huge fan of analog tachometers. Seeing that little needle fly up is one of the most rewarding things you can do, and the revs build so fast on this motorcycle due to the forced induction. You twist that throttle, this thing goes. That's the other thing I would want to mention. Kawasaki, what we don't have here is a steering damper. We're definitely going to add that in along with a few other things. Mostly what we're going to do on this bike, full exhaust, we're going to tune this engine. The fun part of this bike is how much power it has, but Kawasaki tuned in a dead spot right at the beginning, so you don't really every time you try to turn the throttle. And they've also put in a dead spot right at about 12,000 RPMs, and so it kind of tanks way at the top. So what we want to do is we want to keep building that power all the way through the entire rev range. There's no reason why this thing should die out. And like I said, you got about 200 horsepower stock. Could you imagine what 250 horsepower will be like? I've never been on a bike with that much power. I can't wait to see what it's like. So friends and family, stay tuned. This is going to be the winter build of the century. Ideally, brakes, tune, exhaust, and wheels. We will see what happens as the winter goes by. Folks, I'm Matty Motorcycle. That's it for the Kawasaki H2. Please leave some comments. Please let me know what bikes you want. And if you're in the Northeast tri-state area, that's New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut, let me know what kind of bike you have and when you can bring it down to me. I would love to talk with you about it. I'd love to have some interviews going on in here, and we want this channel to blow up. So like, share, tell all your friends about it. I can't wait for the next motorcycle review. Thank you guys so much.